A simple cotton dress, a gleaming luxury car showroom, and a secret that leaves everyone reeling. What happens when a powerful showroom manager hastily dismisses a plainly dressed visitor, not realizing she's the new owner of the entire dealership? Vanessa drove her old SUV into the lot of Sterling Motors, the flagship dealership she just acquired in sun-drenched Scottsdale, Arizona. The desert heat danced off the row of high-end cars parked out front, each glossy finish seeming to glow under the late afternoon sun. She pulled into an unmarked spot at the far end, shut off the engine, and stepped out, pausing to admire the dealership's facade, known only to her, of course, that its ownership had just changed hands. Today, Vanessa hadn't dressed to impress. Quite the opposite. Her pale pink cotton dress was simple, her flip-flops worn and faded, and her crossbody canvas tote looked well-loved. It was a deliberate choice. She wanted to see the dealership's true face, to experience how it operated when no one knew their new boss was watching. As she walked toward the entrance, she noticed a cluster of employees chatting by the reception desk, their laughter and light conversation drifting through the showroom's gleaming glass doors. Vanessa adjusted her tote strap, maintained a polite smile, and stepped inside. She was greeted not only by the rush of cool air from the overhead vents, but also by the mingled sense of new leather, polish, and the faint trill of piano notes over the built-in sound system. Colder, however, were the eyes. The instant she appeared, the showroom's pulse seemed to pause. 3 young staffers at the front desk fell silent at once, their gazes flicking from her modest dress to her flip-flops, and then to her simply tied-back hair. They exchanged knowing looks, half curious, half judgmental, as if in that split second they'd already decided she didn't belong here. At the service counter, Chloe, a blonde receptionist, shot Vanessa a quick half-smile and whispered to her colleague, "New customer. Bet she's just here for the AC and free water." Her soft laughter cut through the hush like a whispered insult, reverberating in Vanessa's ears. Over by the display corner, Brandon, a tall, neatly dressed sales consultant, pulled Tyler aside and murmured, "Looks like someone just came in for a free drink." They both chuckled, but when Vanessa glanced their way, they turned away, restoring their professional airs. No one approached to greet her. No one offered assistance. That passive disdain felt like icy pins pressing through her thin cotton dress. But instead of feeling out of place, Vanessa walked with deliberate grace. She strolled down the row of cars, eyes taking in every expression, from the new receptionist's tentative frown to Chloe's subtle narrowing of her eyes at Vanessa's unbranded dress. Her hand glided over the hood of a silver sedan, feeling the smooth paint, not only to inspect the car's quality, but also to listen to the unspoken comments trailing behind her. At the far end of the showroom, a middle-aged woman with her brown hair pulled into a tight bun moved decisively between the display areas. That was Susan Miller, the showroom manager whom Vanessa's partners had warned her about. Tough and unapproachable, but very set in her ways. Susan's eyes swept over Vanessa for a single second, enough to judge her head to toe, from her pleated cotton dress to her faded flip-flops and plain canvas bag. Vanessa recognized that look, not the look of someone eager to help a customer, but the look of someone defensive and ready to exclude. She smiled to herself and thought, "It seems a simple dress is all it takes to expose a place's true nature." Her footsteps echoed softly on the tile floor, the only sound in that opulent yet frosty air where shiny facades masked a thick layer of prejudice. Yet she remained unfazed. It was time to find out what lay behind those glances. Whether this was a genuinely professional operation or merely a facade of arrogance and pride, Vanessa lifted her chin and turned toward the black coupe positioned at the showroom center, knowing full well that people like her were never meant to get this close. And on the other side, Susan Miller clicked forward in her heels, eyes as sharp as ever, ready to draw a line in the sand. A tense chapter was about to begin, just as Vanessa's foot drew near the black coupe. The decisive click of high heels sounded behind her, steady and forceful, like a declaration of territory. Susan Miller appeared, her brown hair tied back, a tailored dark blazer emphasizing her stern presence. In her hand was a thick clipboard, bristling with papers and a black marker tucked at an angle, like a shield, proclaiming her control over everything in this space. Susan halted in front of Vanessa, politely yet pointedly blocking her path. Her smile was half cordial, half strained, the corners of her mouth upturned but her eyes unamused. "Can I help you with something? We only display premium models here." She emphasized premium, drawing out the word as if to remind Vanessa which class she assumed Vanessa didn't belong to. Vanessa maintained her gentle, courteous smile. "I'd just like to take a look at Sterling Motors' newest line," she replied. Susan's gaze swept Vanessa from head to toe, noting every detail. The slightly wrinkled pale blue cotton dress, the worn flip-flops, the faded canvas bag, each element speaking volumes. Susan felt entitled to judge. Suppressing a sigh, she nodded reluctantly. "Of course," she said, brushing a finger along the clipboard's edge as if searching for a polite excuse to end the exchange. "But I should remind you all vehicles here are made to order and require clients to undergo a fairly strict financial approval process. Sterling Motors. Customers typically have appointments and pre-verification arranged with us." Her tone sounded helpful, but it was really a cold barricade erected so Vanessa would understand her place. Across the showroom, Chloe and Brandon exchanged satisfied smirks, as if they just witnessed the most subtle and effective form of exclusion. Tyler nudged Brandon's shoulder and whispered, "She actually dared to ask for the newest models." Vanessa watched in silence, showing no discomfort. Her calm gaze neither wavered nor faltered. In fact, it seemed to unnerve Susan even more. "Then may I see that black coupe?" Vanessa asked politely. "I really admire the new styling on that model." Susan hesitated briefly, then shook her head firmly. "That coupe is a limited display model. Guests may only approach it when accompanied by a staff member. I'm sorry, but I can't allow you to handle it on your own." Her voice had shifted from polite to blunt, her eyes resembling those of a passport officer, ready to spot any irregularities. The atmosphere between them grew tense. From behind, the staff's whispers continued to hum. Chloe pretended to scour some papers, but kept her gaze fixed on Susan. And Vanessa. Vanessa gave a slight nod, her composed eyes meeting Susan's, as if to remind her gently, "I understand. Please feel free to follow your protocol." But inwardly, she was cataloging every detail, not just the refusal itself, but the disdain in Susan's eyes, and her assumption of who qualified as a premium client. To Vanessa, these were more than temporary barriers. They were a revealing portrait of the very environment she was about to transform, beginning with its smallest prejudices and the seemingly polite greeting that was, in fact, steeped in discrimination. Vanessa's calm reply and unwavering gaze seemed only to deepen Susan's irritation. Still wearing a polite smile, though the corners of her mouth were tightening, Susan smoothly switched tactics, retreating from outright refusal into a veneer of helpful guidance that was anything but inviting. She snatched up her clipboard, glanced at Vanessa, then flipped through a few pages before pulling out a neat stack of documents. "If you're interested," she began, "our pre-owned models tend to be very popular with new customers. The prices and maintenance costs are more manageable, too. We keep an up-to-date list. Would you like to see it?" Susan held out the packet. Its cover boldly labeled pre-owned inventory, special offers for general customers. Inside, each car was listed with price, age, specs, and a side note. Ideal for moderate budgets. The arrangement was subtle and yet a clear message. "This is where you belong." Vanessa accepted the papers, her eyes scanning the fine print until they settled on Susan with a hint of mischievous clarity. She turned the top page over and looked up with an easy smile. "These all look pretty old," she observed. "Interesting, but I'm curious. Why did you think I'd only be interested in used cars?" Susan blinked, caught off guard. A flicker of embarrassment crossed her face, her lip twitching, but she was seasoned. She quickly reclaimed her professional composure, gripping the clipboard for support. "Ah, that's just my experience talking. Customers who come to Sterling Motors for new cars typically have appointments or referrals in place. For first-time visitors, I find it more practical financially and maintenance-wise to start with a pre-owned model. I hope you don't misunderstand me." The tone was gentle, but every word dripped with the arrogant implication that someone like Vanessa, simple cotton dress, worn flip-flops, faded canvas tote, couldn't and shouldn't belong in this polished world of luxury vehicles. Behind them, Chloe and Brandon exchanged mocking whispers, eyes alike with derision. "See? She's in the right segment. Don't get too big for your britches." Chloe sneered. The air around Vanessa felt thick with invisible layers of prejudice. No one needed to say it aloud. Every step she took brushed against the coldness of those professional stares and remarks. Yet Vanessa remained composed. She gently refolded the pages, her gaze never leaving Susan's. In that moment, she saw not only the manager's attitude, but a whole entrenched mindset that allowed people to slot others into predefined roles just by their appearance. But Vanessa was no shrinking violet. She tilted her head as if considering something intriguing, then offered a courteous smile. "Thank you for the suggestion. I suppose sometimes what people see on the outside doesn't reflect what one can truly bring to the table." Susan's face stayed outwardly tranquil, but her eyes darkened with a mix of frustration and uncertainty, her instincts on high alert in the face of this unusually confident, unsuitable customer. And for Vanessa, every moment, every word from Susan only reinforced what she was there to change. Not just a car inventory list, but a long, outdated measure of human worth. The moment Susan's icy courtesy ended, the showroom's atmosphere shifted noticeably, as if on cue from their exchange. The once hidden glances now became blatant, and accompanied by sneers of laughter, no longer held back. At the reception desk, Chloe covered her mouth to stifle a giggle while looking over at Tyler, then cast a glance at Vanessa as though enjoying some private joke. Brandon, standing by the SUV display, couldn't suppress his mockery. He leaned toward his friend and whispered, "Bet wandered into the wrong dealership. Just look at that dress. Maybe she's here to apply for a job. Even the manager wouldn't hire her." Tyler nudged Brandon's arm, trying not to laugh, but his conspiratorial grin gave him away. A few genuine customers glanced over, curious and puzzled at the sudden focus on a plainly dressed woman amid tailored suits, polished leather shoes, and expensive colog. Vanessa heard every whispered comment, every half-smirk, each condescending look. None escaped her notice. Yet instead of reacting, she simply shook her head lightly, pressed her lips together, and let her eyes, calm and steady beneath long lashes, convey her resolve. Her silence was no sign of weakness or resignation. It was a cold-eyed observation, as if cataloging every glance and laugh to map out the true culture of this place. At that moment, silence was her armor, a way to see clearly who judged others by appearances and who reveled in trampling on someone else, just to feel superior. Vanessa walked slowly past the row of sedans, her fingertip tracing a thin dust line on a door, a small smudge that reminded her of things that cling too tightly to be washed away: prejudice, arrogance, and the complacency of a group long unchallenged. She paused before the deep blue coupe, the very model Susan had deftly barred her from touching, and simply admired it from a distance. She realized this place lacked more than hospitality. It was a land of contemptuous stares where invisible robes of unworthiness were draped over anyone in a simple dress or of a different background. From across the showroom, Susan watched with a hint of triumph, pleased that Vanessa remained motionless. Chloe checked in with Brandon, as if to see whether our odd guest would simply leave or embarrass herself further. But Vanessa didn't leave. She continued step by deliberate step, recording every face and reaction, from curiosity to silent animosity, from scorn to petty delight at seeing someone pushed outside the safe circle of the familiar. Her quiet was a counterpoint to all the muffled commotion. It was self-mastery, the strength of someone who's endured countless layers of prejudice, knowing that real change doesn't come from loud arguments, but from seeing through the surface and then transforming it from within. In that moment, Vanessa was doing more than observing. She was preparing for the real confrontation to come, and she knew that the quieter she remained, the more the truth of this place would reveal itself. The air in the showroom felt as though it had grown dense. Every snide laugh, every sideways glance aimed at Vanessa seemed determined to push her beyond the boundaries of this space. Undisturbed, she walked calmly among the rows of cars, acutely aware that the chill she felt wasn't only from the air conditioning, but also from the hearts of those who worked here. With each measured step and silent gesture, she sensed Susan's irritation mounting. Clipboard still clutched like a last line of defense. A subtle electric current of scrutiny traced down Vanessa's spine. Sometimes silence itself is the most powerful challenge to those accustomed to wielding authority through prejudice. Vanessa understood this, and she made a point of meeting every judging eye head-on, even as she deliberately approached the deep blue coupe at the showroom center. The very model Susan had insisted was off-limits without prior approval. Displayed almost like a sacred relic, it gleamed in isolation, underscoring the invisible divide between elite clientele and outsiders. Vanessa paused at the coupe, still holding the printed list of pre-owned vehicles Susan had offered. She didn't intend to test anyone or deliberately break the rules. But the moment her fingers brushed the sleek surface of the door, Susan appeared suddenly behind her, her voice sharp in the hush. "Excuse me, you may not touch the display vehicles." The word seemed to freeze every motion in the showroom. Chloe, Brandon, and Tyler, who only moments before had been whispering and smirking, fell silent, heads swiveling to watch. Even a few genuine customers nearby stiffened, sensing the tension spike, though they couldn't quite place its cause. Susan stepped in front of Vanessa, no longer offering courtesy, but asserting control. She enunciated each word as if speaking to an unruly child. "If you wish to experience the vehicles, you must schedule an appointment and complete our financial approval process. It's the dealership's policy." Vanessa met Susan's gaze steadily. Her gentle smile faded to a slight furrow of her brow, enough to convey displeasure without crossing into rudeness. In a calm, even tone, she asked, "Then who has the authority to make that decision?" Her question cut through Susan's defensive armor like a razor. For an instant, Susan's eyes betrayed confusion before hardening into a guarded stance. She adjusted her posture, scanning the staff as if seeking an ally, then snapped back in a firmer, more commanding voice. No pretense of helpfulness left. "If you're not serious about purchasing, I must ask you to leave the showroom to avoid disrupting our other customers." Her declaration rang out, each word dropping onto the polished tile floor. The showroom's atmosphere stretched taut, every gaze from employees to customers, even Chloe, Brandon, and Tyler, fixed on Vanessa. No one spoke, but everyone felt that this was no longer a routine interaction. It was the moment when entrenched power met the rumbling wave of change, raw, uncompromising, and unafraid. Susan stood rigid, arms wrapped around her clipboard, her face a mask of professional pride, laced with an unspoken fear of losing. Control. It seemed Susan's greatest discomfort sprang not from Vanessa's simple dress, but from the quiet confidence radiating from her, the exact opposite of the ideal client Susan was used to. Vanessa did not respond immediately. Instead, her eyes swept across the room, taking in the hopeful anticipation of those who expected her to bow out, the uneasy relief of those who prioritized order, the nervous curiosity of genuine customers caught in the crossfire. She recalled every time she'd been judged by appearance before. Boardrooms, upscale restaurants, exclusive conferences where she'd stood out as one of the few people of color. But never had discrimination been so blatant, so brazenly unmasked as it was here, in a space touted as polite, professional, and dedicated to high-end clientele. Finally, Vanessa exhaled and gave a determined smile, no longer tempered by politeness, but fortified by resolve. "I'm sorry if my presence is inconvenient, Susan, but sometimes rules are created to hide what people aren't brave enough to say out loud." Susan blinked momentarily, thrown off balance, but rallied quickly, stepping forward again in a tone that sought to reclaim authority. "I'm the direct manager here. It's my responsibility to maintain a safe, professional environment. If you'd like to book an appointment, I can assist. If not, please leave so we can continue serving our valued customers." Her words echoed, and a few staff members visibly straightened as though satisfied that their manager had handled the situation. Brandon even shrugged and muttered, "Told you so." An older female customer edged her son away, whispering about preserving a courteous atmosphere. Chloe and Tyler exchanged knowing nods, pleased at what they saw as a tidy resolution. Vanessa watched it all, her disappointment stealing into quiet determination. She knew this wasn't merely a personal slight. It revealed the true face of a corporate culture, so hardened by prejudice that it had forgotten people's worth isn't measured by their dress, skin color, or brand name accessories. She spoke clearly, loud enough for the entire showroom to hear. "Thank you, Susan. I understand your position, but I believe today will be a day none of us will soon forget." Susan's frown deepened, surprised by Vanessa's composed defiance. Yet she found no retort. Chloe whispered to Tyler, "She's still not leaving. How strange." Vanessa quietly replaced the pre-owned list on the counter and stood tall, gaze fixed on the showroom doors. She didn't look back at Susan, but her presence compelled everyone watching to steal another look. Not at the simple dress, but at the unspoken dignity and quiet pride she carried. She walked out of the showroom, past the gleaming cars, and the eyes that were now wide with a new kind of uncertainty. What Susan and her staff didn't know was that in just a few minutes, a revelation would topple every value they'd clung to for so long. And as Vanessa's hand pressed the glass door to leave, none of them suspected that it would be they, rather than the woman in the simple dress, who would soon face the greatest challenge of their careers. The glass door hadn't even closed behind Vanessa before she stopped, spun around, and fixed Susan with a calm yet electrifying stare that seemed to compress the air around them. The showroom fell silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner and the click of Susan's heels on the tile under the curious, expectant gazes of everyone waiting for the usual escort-out scene to play out. Vanessa remained unflinching, her composed presence somehow more powerful than before. "Could you put me in touch with the owner of Sterling Motors?" Vanessa asked, her tone gentle but unmistakably firm. Not a plea or a request, but a reminder of everyone's right to respect. Susan froze, confusion flashing across her face before she snapped into defensive mode. Her cold eyes swept over the staff behind Vanessa, silently hunting for allies. Trying to keep it polite, yet betraying her irritation, she said, "The owner isn't available today. They're quite busy, so you won't be able to meet them. If you'd like to file a complaint, I can forward your information to customer service. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a display of absolute managerial power." Chloe at the front desk nodded in agreement. Tyler looked at Susan with admiration, and Brandon smirked, convinced this plainly dressed customer had finally hit her limit. Vanessa didn't lose her composure. She offered a small, serene smile, one that unsettled more than it comforted. Reaching into her canvas tote, she pulled out an old cell phone and spoke loud enough for the entire showroom to hear. "No problem. I'll call the owner directly. It won't take long." Silence hit the room like a power outage. Pens froze mid-scribble. Brandon stopped typing, and customers turned around in surprise. Vanessa's calm certainty seemed to squeeze the very space. Even breathing felt like an interruption. Susan nearly lost control. Her knuckles whitened around the clipboard, her gaze locked on Vanessa's phone, a mixture of skepticism and rising fear coursing through her underneath. She felt disbelief, anxiety, wounded pride, and the unmistakable dread that Vanessa might actually know or be connected to the owner. Vanessa said nothing more. She dialed smoothly, and when the line rang, she casual said, "Hello, Alex. I'm in the showroom and there's a customer service issue here. Can you come by?" Her voice carried clearly through the room. Chloe shot Tyler a baffled look. Brandon's mocking grin vanished, and every head snapped toward Vanessa, stunned by this turn of events. No one expected her to follow through, but there she was, injecting the situation with new intensity. After hanging up, Vanessa slipped the phone back into her tote, then turned to Susan with a composed, expectant look. "I'm sure he'll be here soon. If you don't mind, I'll wait." Susan tried to regain her stern tone, but her eyes betrayed her. You know the owner?" For the first time that day, Susan's real worry surfaced. She knew Sterling Motors had a new owner, but had never met her, only been briefed about a mystery investor. Facing Vanessa, her instincts screamed that something was very off. The showroom held its breath, tension and curiosity intermingling. Tyler whispered to Chloe, "Do you think she actually knows the owner?" Chloe's eyes widened. "I've never seen a customer talk to Susan like this." Every employee wondered if they'd made a mistake, and if Alex's arrival would unleash unforeseen consequences. Brandon glanced repeatedly at the door, fear creeping into his stance as his world of assumptions unraveled before him. Susan took a cautious step back. Her clipboard now felt like a flimsy barrier against a reality she couldn't control. She glanced at her watch, hoping for a misunderstanding. But Vanessa stood firm, calm, and commanding, as if she held all the cards. The showroom remained eerily quiet. No whispered gossip, no smirks. A heavy stillness wrapped the room like the calm before a storm. All it took was one phone call and a single, measured question from Vanessa to shatter the illusion of invulnerability this team had upheld. Vanessa stood at the center, reading the faces around her. Worry, uncertainty, even clumsy regret. In a place built on luxury and pride, a simple challenge from a woman in a plain dress was already cracking their polished veneer. She allowed herself a slight smile, thinking, "Sometimes all it takes is one question to reveal the truth, and once it's out, nothing can stay hidden." At that moment, the showroom's automatic doors slid open. A new figure was stepping in, someone poised to expose years of arrogance and false assumptions, ready to unleash a real shockwave through Sterling Motors. The moment Vanessa hung up, the showroom's atmosphere seemed to solidify. Every motion slowed, leaving only the hum of the air conditioner and the soft scrape of heels on tile. The staff, once so confident in their positions, were suddenly swept up in a vortex of anxiety, each person unsettled in their own way. Whispers and questioning looks no longer focused on Vanessa, but shifted to Susan, the manager who had just asserted total control. Susan began to move forward, her clipboard trembling in her hands despite her effort to conceal her panic. Her eyes darted around, first toward Vanessa, now the unassailable center of attention, then out toward the lot, as if searching for an ill omen. Every sound from the parking area made her start. At the front desk, Chloe and Tyler exchanged hushed, tense whispers. Does she really know the owner? Could she actually be the new owner we've heard about? Brandon, the one who had mocked Vanessa most fiercely, now stood rigid, his face contorted in regret as he replayed his own behavior. Customers in the showroom felt the unmistakable tension. Some lingered out of curiosity, others awkwardly edged toward the exit. An older gentleman brushed past Vanessa, pausing to study her with an inscrutable expression. Part sympathy, part anticipation of something monumental about to unfold. Vanessa remained at the showroom center like an unmovable pillar amid a storm of uncertainty. She showed no haste, no triumph, only the composed calm of someone secure in her own worth, knowing that in a moment, everything here would change forever. Susan tried to reclaim the initiative, stepping forward in a rare tone of genuine confusion. Are you actually connected to the owner? Who did you just call? Vanessa offered a polite smile, her gaze drifting to the golden afternoon light, glinting on the luxury cars. I merely called a friend. His name is Alex. He's the regional director and represents the owner here. I imagine he'll arrive shortly. Her words, like a single pebble dropped into still water, rippled outward. Chloe gripped her stack of papers tighter. Tyler turned away, panic barely concealed while Brandon froze into place, fists clenched. Time dragged, each second stretching unbearably as everyone both wished this confrontation to end and couldn't tear their eyes away from the unexpected turn of events. Occasionally, the showroom door chime rang with new arrivals, each sound jolting the group back to the tension at hand. Soon enough, the automatic glass doors swished open. Solid footsteps echoed through the hush as Alex Thompson appeared. Tall, clad in a crisp navy suit, bearing the confident air of a seasoned leader. He scanned the room, his gaze landing immediately on Vanessa. For a heartbeat, the crowd collectively held its breath. "Miss Morgan," Alex greeted warmly, striding forward to shake Vanessa's hand with genuine respect, as one would welcome a peer, not a stranger. The display stunned every employee, especially Susan, who nearly dropped her clipboard. Shocked glances darted between Alex and Vanessa, then back to Susan, the manager, who only minutes ago had wielded absolute power over the showroom. Alex ignored the stares, his full attention on Vanessa. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting. Was there something here that didn't meet your expectations?" Vanessa returned his smile, her voice soft but pointed. "Just a little customer service experience. I thought we should talk things through, ideally in front of everyone." In that instant, Susan realized it all. Every refusal, every condescending look, every exclusionary gesture now fully exposed before the person who held the real authority over not just her, but the entire team. Chloe took an involuntary step back, her hands trembling. Tyler bowed his head in shame. Brandon forced a strange smile that couldn't hide his distress. Alex turned, his expression stern. "I'd like all staff to gather for a brief meeting right now." His summons carried no threat. Yet in that context, it rang like a battle cry, compelling everyone to dismantle the old hierarchy. Even Susan, the queen of the showroom moments before, was reduced to another face in the line of those called to account. Vanessa led the way, head held high, calm and resolute, as the group filed toward the conference room. Behind her, Susan struggled to maintain a composed facade, her steps heavy with the weight of impending reckoning. The others trailed nervously, stealing glances at one another, wondering if their own behavior would be under scrutiny. None could predict exactly what lay ahead, but all understood this. With a single phone call, a woman in a simple dress, once dismissed and mocked, had upended the long-standing values of Sterling Motors. What was about to unfold would unveil not merely a customer service issue, but the very soul of a team built on pride and now teetering on the brink of profound change. The conference room still crackled with the unresolved tension from moments earlier. Chairs scraped across the floor, blending with the rapid, uneven breaths of several employees. Every pair of eyes, curious, fearful, urgent, was glued to the door as Alex Thompson's footsteps rang out on the cold stone tile. The instant he appeared, Alex radiated a poised, unwavering authority. His crisp navy suit only underscored the command he carried. An authority Susan had always believed was hers alone. When Alex stopped before Vanessa, the room seemed to catch its breath. He offered a broad, genuine smile and extended his hand to her, his tone friendly yet deeply respectful, casting Vanessa in an entirely new light for everyone present. "Miss Morgan, it's a pleasure to meet you. I came as soon as I received your call." That handshake, simple yet profoundly powerful, silently reversed every invisible hierarchy that had been in place. Susan's face went ashen, her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes wide, hands gripping her clipboard as if it were the last bastion of her former authority. Sweat beaded at her hairline as she stared between Alex and Vanessa, hoping against hope this was some cruel prank. But there it was, in black and white. Irrefutable truth. Alex scanned the room from the sales team to the receptionist, from a tearful Chloe to a stunned Brandon, his disappointment plain but his professionalism intact. In a clear, commanding voice, he announced, "I'm guessing not everyone here knows that this is Vanessa Morgan, the new owner of Sterling Motors." The room exploded. Pens dropped, phones clattered, and papers fluttered to the floor. Tyler sat motionless. Chloe covered her mouth in shock. Brandon looked as if he'd been slapped, mouth agape. Susan nearly toppled over, bracing herself on the table. In all her years, she'd never faced such public humiliation or loss of control. All her polite facades, exclusionary tactics, snide judgments, and haughty stares now turned into weapons pointed back at her. She trembled, stammering what passed for an apology before the entire staff weak and broken, a far cry from the resolute manager they knew. I'm truly sorry, Miss Morgan." "I didn't know." Vanessa's expression remained serene, her eyes shining, not triumphant, nor burdened, just a quiet acknowledgement of what respect truly means. She gave Susan a small, courteous nod that carried a powerful message. Real authority isn't about title or appearance, but about listening and valuing others. Alex continued without missing a beat, allowing no one to shirk responsibility. "Ms. Vanessa Morgan is the new owner of this dealership. She will oversee every change, every standard of service, culture, and personnel here. What happened today is both a test and a final opportunity for us all to reflect, each word cut through Sterling Motors' collective pride like a surgeon's blade." Brandon bowed his head. Chloe dabbed at tears. Tyler twisted his hands under the table. No one dared meet Vanessa's gaze, not even Susan, who had once loudly championed standards and control. The air in the room grew dense. Stunned silence gave way to shame and regret, washing over the staff. Some felt as though their masks had been ripped away, forcing them to confront their true selves. For the first time, while Susan stood exposed, her once solid power structure in ruins, Vanessa spoke no more. She let the silence stretch, letting it seep into every mind, every pair of eyes now flickering with embarrassment or remorse. This was the stillness of a leader who knows that sometimes a cultural shock is the only way to jolt a long, slumbering organization awake. Alex placed a steady hand on Vanessa's shoulder, then addressed the room one last time. "I ask everyone to remain silent and listen to Miss Morgan. Today's events are lessons for every department, for each of us, including myself. This is our moment to transform Sterling Motors from a symbol of arrogance into a beacon of respect and fairness. Susan still trembled as she murmured her apology again, but this time no one rushed to defend her. Chloe, Brandon, Tyler, their quiet compliance spoke volumes. They all understood they could no longer cling to the old ways. Vanessa cast a look around the room, a trace of sadness in her eyes, but unwavering resolve in her posture. She knew it would take time, effort, and firm guidance to rebuild trust. But in that moment, she had drawn a line under the exclusionary, prejudiced culture that once defined this dealership. From that day forward, none would dare see the woman in the simple dress as an outsider again. Instead, they recognized her as the force who had upended every old order and paved the way for a new era at Sterling Motors. The whispers and stunned silence in the conference room had barely died down when Vanessa, her trademark composure intact, pivoted to face Susan. Her gaze no longer held the polite difference of an ordinary customer. It carried a weight and authority forged by one who had known prejudice and yet walked through every trial with her head held high. There was no mistaking it now. Underneath that simple cotton dress stood a true CEO, and her very presence was the harshest test of character for everyone in the room. Susan stood opposite. Vanessa, a clipboard trembling lightly in her hands, her lips pressed into a thin line, sweat beating at her temples. All eyes were fixed on her as though the space had shrunk to include only these two women, one who had once wielded absolute power here, and the other who had shifted the entire balance with nothing but silence and self-respect. Vanessa didn't raise her voice, yet her words rang out clearly in the thick, tense air. If today I were not the owner of this dealership, just a woman in an unremarkable dress, would I receive the same respect afforded any other customer? This question wasn't for Susan alone, but for everyone present. A stark reminder about how they treated people, about fairness, and about the true meaning of the company culture they all prided themselves on. No one answered. Susan parted her lips as if to speak, but the sound caught in her throat. Her face turned ghostly pale, her lips quivering as though she wanted to apologize or defend herself. Yet she understood. There was no excuse that could undo what had just happened. Across the room, employees from Chloe and Brandon to Tyler bowed their heads in silence. They had believed themselves to be professional and welcoming, but it turned out their kindness applied only to customers who fit the narrow template they were used to. Anything different, a dress out of fashion, a minority skin tone, a worn canvas tote, was enough to justify their silent judgments, their exclusion. The atmosphere felt taut as a drawn bowing. Perhaps never before had the showroom at Sterling Motors felt so heavy, so shameful, so confoundingly raw. Every breath, every sideways glance was a private reckoning. Fairness, a value so fundamental, was now being laid bare and dissected in the most painful way. Vanessa paused, letting her questions sink in. She scanned the room, not merely looking at Susan, but at every face, even those who'd scoffed or sneered, or silently regarded her as an outsider when she first entered the showroom that morning. She spoke again, her tone firm. I want every employee in the conference room right now. We need to have a serious discussion about how we work and what Sterling Motors truly stands for. There was no choice. Vanessa's directive was final, yet it also served as an invitation for each person to confront their own behavior. Susan gave a slight nod, clutching the clipboard to her chest as if to safeguard the last fragments of her pride. Brandon, Chloe, Tyler, and the others rose without a word and filed into the meeting room, none daring to meet Vanessa's or Alex's eyes. The oppressive silence followed them like a shadow, carried from the showroom into the conference room by their hesitant steps and averted gazes. Inside, Alex stood beside Vanessa, his expression cold, but shot through with deep respect for the woman who had upended the old order with courage and compassion. He recognized that this was a pivotal moment, not just for Sterling Motors, but for every person seated here. Vanessa took her seat at the head of the table, hands neatly folded before her, radiating calm authority. She didn't need to raise her voice or assert any overt dominance. Her mere presence, the collective hush and the echo of her question were enough to compel everyone to look inward. She waited until every eye was on her before continuing. Before we talk about procedures, service standards, or revenue targets, I want us to answer the most important question. Who is Sterling Motors? What values do we represent? And how do we ensure that every customer, every employee, every single person who walks through our doors is treated with genuine respect? Silence stretched on, unbroken. Everyone understood that this was no longer just Vanessa's or Susan's story, but a shared lesson. That lesson demanded accountability, a humbling moment for some, but also a commitment to a different future. One where fairness isn't just a slogan, but the guiding principle behind every action. Susan could only bow her head, her shoulders trembling. She knew this day would leave an indelible, painful mark on her career, a necessary reckoning to thaw the frozen prejudices entrenched in minds for so long. And Vanessa, though her eyes glinted with sadness, remained resolute. She knew that real change begins in moments like this. To her, fairness was not some lofty ideal, but the daily choice each of them makes to respect one another, no matter how different they may seem. Today, she was ready to lay the first cornerstone of that change at Sterling Motors. The air in the conference room felt heavier than ever as everyone settled around the long, glossy table under the harsh white lights. Their faces taut, restless, even fearful. A suffocating silence stretched on for nearly a minute before Vanessa spoke, every deliberate movement and blink commanding absolute attention. Seated at the head of the table beside Alex, now an observer rather than the instigator. Vanessa lifted her head, her eyes calm and steady, embodying the presence of a true leader. She didn't rush. Her measured pace lent weight to each word. My name is Vanessa Morgan, and as Alex introduced, I officially became Sterling Motors' new owner last month. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Anxious glances. The sound of someone swallowing hard. Brandon, who'd mocked Vanessa the most, stared at the table, shoulders hunched, his earlier smugness gone. Chloe bit her lip, fingers twisting a sheet of paper. Tyler pressed against the wall, eyes fixed on the tabletop, hands clasped so tightly they trembled. Susan sat at the far end, shrinking into herself, cheeks flushed with shame, perspiration beating at her hairline, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Vanessa paused, ensuring she had everyone's full attention, then continued. Today, I arrived not in a luxury car or designer clothes, but wearing a simple cotton dress and worn flip-flops. I wanted to see for myself how this environment truly operates when no one knows who I am. Her gaze swept the room, not harsh, but so incisive it laid bare every pretense. I'm honestly disappointed. Even today in a dealership touted as modern and professional, I witnessed old prejudices applied unconsciously or even deliberately to customers who dress simply because of their skin color or their gender. Not just me, but anyone who walks through these doors could face cold stars and exclusionary remarks. She drew in a deep breath. Disappointment tinged her tone, but so did sadness and resolve. We may sell the finest, sleekest cars, but if what customers receive is suspicion, discrimination, and indifference, then everything this dealership stands for becomes meaningless. The room went utterly silent. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. The morning sneers turned to unshakable guilt. Brandon clenched his hands, face downcast and sweaty. Tyler's lips pressed together, eyes shifting between Vanessa and Susan. Regret and self-questing filled every corner of the room. Vanessa pressed on, giving no one an escape. I want you all to understand. My being the new owner is incidental. What matters is that a small test today stripped away every mask. Don't think that without oversight you can follow procedure and forget the humanity behind every interaction. She fixed her gaze on Susan, still head bowed, hands gripping each other as though to prevent themselves from breaking. Susan, I know you've served here for years and earned praise for being professional and attentive. But today you acted out of habit rather than from respect for a fellow human being. This isn't just your fault. It's a problem that runs through the entire organization, an invisible shadow that has lingered over Sterling doors for far too long. She fell silent, letting her words sink in. Alex nodded in agreement, his disappointment plain. Vanessa then addressed the whole group. I don't want anyone apologizing to me simply because I'm the owner. I want you to face yourselves and ask, if I were just an ordinary woman with no power or name recognition, would I still deserve respect? And if the answer is no, what must change immediately? The question cut through the stifling atmosphere like a blade. For the first time, Susan dared to look up, tears in her eyes, lips trembling, no longer defiant, but desperate for a chance to make things right. Chloe began to sob while Brandon mumbled, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Unable to get the words out, Vanessa remained silent, allowing everyone to feel the full weight of the truth. No shouting, no threats of termination, just an unflinching exposure of reality, painful yet necessary. She believed this lesson would leave a deeper mark than any disciplinary report could. Her voice softened as she spoke again. We must change, not just on paper or in slogans, but in our hearts, habits, and every glance and every word. Otherwise, Sterling Motors will become an empty name, one that no one wants to return to or build a career at. The room held its breath in the thick silence of regret. Yet in that hush, Vanessa sensed a small flicker of hope, because sometimes, only when the final masks fall can people truly begin to grow. The conference room remained deathly silent, as if every ounce of shame, unease, and awakening were weighing on everyone's shoulders. Looking into each wrined, uneasy face, Vanessa knew this painful moment would become the crucial spark for real change, and she was determined not to let it end with guilt alone. Guilt would be the foundation, but it needed to be the starting point for a journey to rebuild new values. Vanessa laced her fingers together in front of her, sat up straight, and let her gaze sweep to the far end of the table, where Susan still dared not look up. She lowered her voice, but each word rang against the long-standing biases like resounding bells. We don't just sell cars. We build trust and relationships. Customers come here not merely to buy a vehicle, but to place their confidence in a brand. a community built on respect and empathy. Starting today, I want Sterling Motors to be a place where every customer, regardless of background, gender, skin color, religion, or style, is welcomed and treated with absolute respect. She paused, letting her words sink in. She could see the mixture of nervousness and fear, but also subtle glimmers of hope and, above all, genuine attentiveness. Then her tone grew firmer. I'm launching a comprehensive retraining program immediately on communication skills, handling every type of situation, and recognizing and eliminating all unconscious biases. No one here, myself included, Susan, and every one of you at the end of this table, has the right to think, I'm already good enough, or I'm already professional. The world changes every day, and so do our customers. We'll only thrive when we admit our mistakes, embrace change, and relentlessly relearn from the ground up. Her eyes scanned the room, stern, yet filled with optimism. Inspiring, rather than instilling fear. I want each of you to ask yourselves honestly, are you ready to change? Do you have the courage to recognize where you went wrong? If anyone disagrees, if anyone believes they cannot live by Sterling Motors' new values, speak up right now. The silence that followed was more suffocating than the one that greeted her earlier revelations. Each person seemed to shrink inward, probing their own consciences. Brandon still kept his head down, but his hands had stopped trembling, his eyes now reflecting the first sparks of determination to make things right. Chloe wiped away tears and gave a small nod. Tyler pressed his lips together, exhaling slowly as though releasing the heaviest pressure of a long day. Susan finally lifted her head, her eyes still red but no longer hopeless. She understood that refusing to change meant exclusion from this new path. Yet beneath her trembling, a determined light flickered because she, more than anyone, knew what it felt like to be judged and left out. And she didn't want to nurture a toxic culture any longer. Vanessa watched, waiting for every reaction. She knew deeply ingrained habits wouldn't evaporate overnight. But this prolonged silence wasn't defiance. It was proof of agreement, or at least a willingness to accept the challenge. No one dared to mock or whisper objections anymore. No one said no. She nodded gently, her voice softening. Change has never been easy. But if we want to survive, to grow, to truly become a modern professional team, you have no other choice. Everyone here will receive retraining support and the opportunity to make amends, provided you embrace it. Anyone who intentionally goes against our new values, who disrespects customers or colleagues, let me be clear. You will no longer have a place at Sterling Motors. At the head of the table, Alex nodded in agreement, his gaze now brimming with admiration rather than anxiety. He knew that only a leader, willing to speak truth, to demand that the team confront painful realities, could rebuild the future. Vanessa concluded in a warm, yet resolute tone. I don't expect perfection. I just expect honesty, a commitment to improvement, and a genuine respect for one another. That is the only foundation on which Sterling Motors can truly stand and prosper. I will stand by your side, but only if you are truly ready to change. The room remained silent, but this was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of resolve, of hope, and of a fresh beginning. Vanessa allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. Sometimes one day, one meeting, one seemingly harsh test can lay the groundwork for an entirely new cultural journey. a journey she and Sterling Motors were now ready to embark upon together. The room still resonated with Vanessa's final words, a silence spreading, not one of submission, but of the weight of a new awareness. Everyone seated there, from young staff like Chloe and Brandon to veterans of Sterling Motors, understood. This moment marked the boundary of their growth, a test no one could evade. Vanessa turned to Susan, a simple gesture that nonetheless drew every eye in the room. Her gaze was no longer cold or reproachful. Instead, it carried listening, an opportunity, a genuine invitation. "I want to hear what you have to say, Susan." Across the table sat Susan Miller, the woman once famed for her iron resolve, the steel wall that barred anyone she deemed unworthy. Now she appeared small and fragile. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes rimmed red, her hands knotted together on the tabletop. Her pride had been stripped away, replaced by a raw, unmasked shame. Yet in that vulnerability, for the first time, the Sterling Motors team saw Susan as a real person. Susan drew in a shaky breath, forced her head up, her voice with emotion. I am sorry. I discriminated. I let my biases and personal arrogance override the respect every customer deserved, no matter how they looked, what they wore, or where they came from. I truly apologize, Miss Morgan, and I'm sorry to everyone here. The air turned even heavier, yet more honest. A few employees nodded in quiet understanding, even those who'd silently sided with Susan moments ago. Vanessa remained still, her eyes softening. She knew this admission carried a tremendous cost for Susan. Susan continued, her voice choked but determined. I relied too much on my experience on the numbers and processes and forgot the most essential thing. Every customer and every colleague deserves to be treated with kindness and fairness. I was wrong, and I promise, if given the chance, I will make this right. I will be the first to participate in every training program and adhere to the new standards you set. And I will lead by example for everyone else. Regret colored Susan's every word, her lips trembling with each confession. For her, this apology wasn't just about saving her job. It was a genuine desire to atone for the harm she had caused, whether intentional or not. She looked to Vanessa with eyes pleading for redemption, all trace of her former arrogance gone. Vanessa nodded, her voice warm but resolute, each word laying the first stone for a cultural rebuild. I believe in second chances, but I also believe real change comes when we not only admit our faults, but act to correct them. Susan, I'm giving you that chance. And I want to see you become the pioneer of this transformation, a role model for your colleagues. She paused, scanning the room with unwavering determination. None of us is perfect, but the one thing we cannot do is refuse to change once the truth is revealed. I hope you will show everyone that biases can be erased if we have the courage to confront and overcome them. Susan nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks, not from humiliation, but from relief, recognition, and the gift of a fresh start. In that rare moment, those who had quietly colluded in the showroom's prejudices began to grasp the value of honesty, courage, and the power of renewal that follows true contrition. Brandon, Chloe, Tyler, and the others no longer dared to bow their heads in hidden shame. To them, Susan's journey became a powerful example that the cost of prejudice isn't just an apology, but an unending commitment to change. And at the head of the table, Vanessa, still wearing her gentle smile, quietly witnessed her team truly begin their metamorphosis. Painful, but more necessary than any moment in Sterling Motors' history. The room fell into a deep silence the moment Susan's choked apology ended, but it was no longer the suffocating hush of shame and tension. Something gentler, more profound, was stirring in everyone's hearts, the relief of having faced the truth, of having owned their mistakes, and a small spark of hope for a fresh start. That feeling spread quickly like the ripple effect of genuine courage. Someone else's voice tentatively rose from across the table. Chloe, the young receptionist with damp eyes, spoke first, her voice trembling, but sincere. I want to apologize, to you, Vanessa, and to everyone here. I went along with the judgment without speaking up. From now on, I'll try not to judge anyone by their appearance or circumstances. I want to learn to listen more and to grow both in my work and in how I treat our customers. Brandon, the one who'd laughed the loudest at Vanessa earlier, pressed his hands together and bowed his head. I was wrong. I thought I was just joking around, but my words helped create an unwelcome atmosphere. I'll be the first to join every training session, and I promise to speak up if I see anyone mistreated, whether they're a customer or a colleague, Tyler. Usually so quiet, cleared his throat, and spoke in a husky, determined tone. I get it now. At times, I thought sticking to procedure was enough, but that's irresponsible both to myself and to this brand. I promise to change my attitude and relearn everything if I have to. One by one, veterans and newcomers alike, each person shared a regret or a commitment to change. Their brief, heartfelt pledges built into a powerful wave of resolve. This room, once filled with defensive masks, was shedding its old armor, daring at last to speak honestly and to look at one another with new eyes, eyes of empathy and determination. Vanessa listened quietly, offering gentle nods of encouragement. In her mind, hope blossomed, for a single seed of honesty and courage can revive an entire garden. She knew she'd chosen the right path. Real change starts from within, with each individual. When everyone had spoken, Alex, until now a silent observer, stood and stepped forward, his gaze full of respect for Vanessa. I'd like to say a few words on behalf of management and myself. I fully support the new culture Vanessa is building. I once thought solid business metrics were enough, but today I've seen that true value lies in the trust, respect, and diversity our customers and employees feel. Vanessa is a strong, fair leader. She's given us a powerful lesson in compassion, courage, and conviction. He turned to the team, faces newly transformed by their emotional journey. I believe Sterling Motors can become the industry standard for respect and inclusion, not just here in Scottsdale, but throughout our entire network. I pledged to stand with Vanessa and with all of you, ensuring that the changes we start today aren't just words, but consistent actions from top to bottom. His words closed one chapter and opened another, brimming with fresh energy. Heads slowly lifted, eyes now shining with purpose rather than fear of authority. They had come to understand their responsibility to themselves, to each other, and to every customer they served. Vanessa felt that shift deeply. She looked around the room, realizing that even those she least expected to change had confronted their own fractures and chosen to begin anew. That was the true miracle and the greatest reward for a leader. No more heavy sighs, no furtive glances. In their place were looks of mutual trust. They were not only speaking to Vanessa and Alex, they were speaking to themselves. I will do better. I will be part of this change. And from that moment on, Sterling Motors truly stepped into a new era, an era of honesty, compassion, and a shared commitment to growth. The meeting broke with everyone still carrying that cocktail of nervous excitement, remorse, and relief. Staff drifted out one by one, their emotions still raw, apprehensive yet eager, ashamed yet buoyed by a newfound lightness. Vanessa rose last, smoothing her simple cotton dress, then paused by the floor to ceiling windows where Scottsdale's late-afternoon sun streamed in, gilding the showroom tiles. She walked slowly into the main lobby, inhaling deeply but firmly, each step marking a new chapter in Sterling Motors' story. Under that warm light, the gleaming cars felt inviting rather than distant, their polished exterior suddenly friendly, something Vanessa, even as CEO, had never truly experienced in any of her showrooms. It wasn't about power anymore. She knew she had planted a seed of a new value, one rooted not in material gains or outward glamour, but in growth, unity, and mutual respect. Soft footsteps sounded behind her. Susan, transformed by the day's events, approached tentatively. Her eyes were still damp, yet they shone with a determination Vanessa had never seen before. Gone was the icy authority of a gatekeeper. In her place stood a humble colleague, ready to relearn the lessons of dignity and forgiveness. Susan spoke quietly. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't let you down." Vanessa turned, offering a gentle smile that carried quiet strength. "You don't need to thank me, Susan. Show me in your actions, not just your words." Starting today, Sterling Motors won't just sell luxury cars. It will cultivate an environment where everyone has the opportunity to grow, no matter who they are, what they wear, or where they come from. We'll build that together in every gesture, every decision, every time we're brave enough to face our mistakes. Susan let those words wash over her, understanding that she'd been given more than a career lifeline. She'd been granted the chance to become a better version of herself, something no one had offered in decades but Vanessa. Vanessa turned her gaze back to the expansive showroom. In the corners, Chloe carefully straightened the reception desk. Brandon reviewed customer files with thoughtful concentration. Tyler and the others now checked in on one another, their eyes meeting in newfound solidarity rather than silent judgment. The atmosphere had changed. While the road ahead still held challenges, a new culture had already begun to bloom from each person's heart. Alex stepped forward and offered Vanessa a firm handshake. "Congratulations, Vanessa. That was the toughest meeting I've ever witnessed and the most transformative. I'll stand with you and this team until Sterling Motors truly becomes the model of respect, diversity, and professionalism." Vanessa nodded, her smile bright with conviction. "I don't expect overnight transformation. But if day by day every person here reflects honestly, apologizes when they're wrong, and defends our shared values, then I believe not just Sterling Motors, but any organization can undergo a powerful renewal." In the golden sunset shining through the glass, Vanessa's figure stood out among the luxury vehicles. Not as an outsider, but as the very spark of change, a flame the entire team would now nurture and carry forward. Vanessa Morgan's story didn't end in a high-end dealership in Scottsdale. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one in which every person is seen, respected, and given a chance. Where a down-to-earth, strong black woman CEO led her team beyond the boundaries of prejudice to build a fairer, more modern, and more humane world each day. From that moment on, every customer who walked into Sterling Motors, regardless of attire, vehicle, choice, or background, was greeted with a genuine smile, a non-judgmental welcome, and the assurance that here, human dignity always comes first. If you found this story inspiring, please like, share with friends, and subscribe for more uplifting, unexpected, and human-centered stories each week. Thank you for joining us on this journey.